Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. As you know, this is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Tom Singer, and I have been with ATC for, almost 2 years now, and we're doing some fun and new things in the community. If you are not familiar with the Austin Technology Council, now is the time to get involved. And if you were involved in the past, now's the time to get re-involved. So this podcast was started. We're like 72 episodes in. This podcast was created so that we could interview really interesting people who are doing things that touch our tech community. So every week, I try to bring informative interviews that are going to make you think. And today, we're going to talk about angel investing. And we are joined by the chairman of the Central Texas Angel Network, Gary Forni. Hey, Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Happy to be here.
For those of you who don't know Gary, and gosh, I think we figured it out. I've known him for 2 decades, which is a long time. Gary, he has been involved with 4 or 5 startups here in Austin, and he has been involved in the community for coming up on 20 years here, working to help grow things. And he loves to give back. And one of the ways he gives back is as an angel investor, but also as a mentor. He was involved with Techstars from the very beginning as a mentor the whole time they were here. And you're always going to see him out and about talking to young entrepreneurs who want to find the path and not make the same mistakes that he or I or others have made along the way. So Gary is exactly who we want to talk about when we're talking about angel investing. So let's talk a little bit about CTAN. I know CTAN was founded, if I remember correctly, it was like 2006, somewhere around there. So you've been around about 20 years, but like many groups, like the Austin Technology Council, these groups go through iterations and different phases. Tell me a little bit about the history of CTAN and where you are today.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so that's exactly right. CTAN started in 2006. Jamie Rhodes was one of the founders and the first head of it. I joined it in about 2011, and I joined it because CTAN had invested in my company. And I got to know the angels who were the investors in my company. I was so impressed with their just desire to help people be successful and their giving of the Rolodex, the giving of their time and advice, that I had decided very quickly that after I exited that company, I was going to join CTAN. And so that was about 2011. CTAN, kind of the heydays of CTAN were kind of in that 2016, 17, 18 kind of time frame when we had peaked just before COVID. And we were the number one angel group in the country for a couple years. And I think we alternated with one other group for maybe 3 years as the number one group in the country. But as the pandemic happened, we, like many companies and like many groups, angels just fled, right? And startups for that matter just fled. And so we kind of slowed down our investment. We never stopped. There was always a core group. It was always online, and it's just not as an exciting an experience online. But we made our way through that, and over the last 2+ years since the core of the pandemic, we've been actively growing the organization, actively growing our engagement with other groups, meaning ecosystem players, to increase the funnel of startups and bring in more angels to fund those startups. And we all know how difficult it's been to fund a startup over the last 4 years, and we're trying to make a difference in that.
Nice. Well, and you're right, and the Austin Technology Council knows this. The pandemic wasn't really kind to membership organizations who relied very heavily on bringing people together in that live format. And so coming out the other side, what are some of the changes that you've made, and what makes CTAN exciting now? Yeah,
so one is we've really focused on in-person activities. We actually have about 2 in-person activities a week. So not everybody does everything. I mean, there's 120 members. You're not going to see this huge group of angels at every single event. But there are events that we get a large number of angels. Certainly there's our investing events where We have pitch dinners, et cetera. But we also do something we call angel speed dating, where we'll bring in 25 or 30 angels and 70 or 80 companies, and we'll cycle these companies through the angels for 5 to 6 minutes apiece, so that each company gets, 2 or 3 different angels that they get feedback from. You're not pitching your company, you're not trying to get an investment, but you're trying to get some feedback so that when you do come for an investment, you're not coming in cold. You have this sense of what do angels respond to and what don't angels respond to, and how to pitch to those people. And so these kind of outbound activities, we have an ecosystem committee that engages with every accelerator in town, with every incubator in town, engages with the schools in town. And if you know anything, engaging with UT is this many-armed beast. And so we're always finding yet another repository of entrepreneurship in UT. I think there's roughly 30 now that, we're trying to make sure that at least they know who we are. And when they have a startup, we get a look at that startup and we can give some mentoring and some feedback to that startup. And so this kind of outbound activity is really something we've been focusing on for the last 2 years.
And I know firsthand, because we're talking with you guys about doing an event together. Having you here on the podcast was one of the first things. The Austin Technology Council is kind of doing the same thing. We're very focused on this community outreach and working together with all of the other nonprofits and other groups that serve and touch our technology community. Because if we're all competing, if we're all trying to say, hey, there's a great idea, we're going to take that into our organization and do a competitive thing, it waters it all down. So this whole idea of being able to work together goes a long way.
100% on that. And so that sense of let's work together is something that's really exciting about Austin that you don't see in the Bay Area, you don't see in Silicon Valley, you don't see in other places. One, they might not have the ecosystem. So if you're in smaller towns in, say, the Midwest, they're just not going to have the ecosystem to do that. But these other places where they do have the ecosystem, they don't have this sense of cooperation. And so at CTAN, we want to support ATC. We want to support ATI. We want to support all of the different incubators. For that matter, there are other angel groups in Austin. We want to support them. The first deal that SWAN, Southwest Angel Network, did was a CTAN deal that we gave to them. We invested in them as well, but we brought them into the deal because it all works better if we work together. And so we're definitely, you take the lead, we'll support you, or we'll take the lead, you can support us. But this is going to be so much better if we work together.
Right. And I mean, Austin Technology Council, kind of one of my official mottos is we try to be that thread that runs out through everything that touches tech, because every now and then, as a whole community, as a whole ecosystem, we got to tug on that thread and bring everybody together. And so that's sort of our rule. Instead of competing with everybody, we need to support everybody, because sometime we're going to need them to support a policy issue, because we're really involved with the Technology Councils of North America, which is a lobbying group that fights in Washington, D.C. for causes for small and mid-sized tech companies, because over 60% of things that either get passed or killed on the Hill come from lobbying from like the 10 largest companies. And while that's great, as growth-oriented companies, we can't let big tech decide everything, because not everything lines up for what our growth oriented. So sometimes we need to get people in for a policy issue, or maybe get out the vote, because I think Austin could be affected in a positive way if everybody in tech actually went to the polls for our local elections, or then for an event like the upcoming Austin Tech Hall of Fame. We want to make sure that we can pull everybody together when the timing is right. So we loved it when we ran across the team at CTAN, because you guys are doing exactly what we want to do. So we're looking forward to working together on lots of things.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited as well.
So let's take this down one path here. A lot of people have ideas. They have ideas for a company, whether it's a tech company or not, and they want to go talk to angel investors. But how does somebody even, number one, get in front of angel investors? And number two, when you get to pitch, what are some of the mistakes people make? How can people be a better pitcher to angels?
So at CTAN, we look at 300 or 400 companies a year, right? So kind of varies depending where we are and how busy the year is. But so over the time I've been here, I've looked at roughly 4,000 companies.
Wow.
That's not necessarily 4,000 pitches, but it's 4,000 companies. And that's a lot, but a few things really, really stand out with that. One is entrepreneurs need to recognize there are really 3 categories of investors, right? So there's the angel, and we invest in seed and C plus and Series A early on, right? And then there's VC, and they invest after us. There's Series A, Series B. Sometimes there's some float in terms of micro VCs, et cetera, but they're really after the angels. And then there's PE or private equity, and they come, even later stage, right? But so you got to recognize who you're pitching to. And if you're an early entrepreneur, you're really looking for angels. And you need to recognize that angels invest their own money. We're not like VCs and PE. We don't have funds that we're investing, or we're not driven by those. So we're investing our own money. And so recognizing why people do things is critical to how you're going to have success. So one, all angel groups are the same. We want to make money. We need a return because that's how we're going to roll it back in, right? Two, most of us are focused on we want to give back. We've been successful for one reason or another in our lives. We have disposable income. We want to make investments. We want to make money with that income, but we also want to give back to the community. And that's a big piece of what we want to do. And then this third one thing is we want to share our experiences and help companies and young entrepreneurs, even old entrepreneurs, it doesn't really matter, avoid making the same mistakes that we did or that others that we have invested in made those mistakes. So that kind of concept of how do we give it back to the community and how do we help them do better is a big piece of why we invest. And so one of the things I tell many of the entrepreneurs, especially if I'm on a panel or in a forum, is, money is the least valuable thing we give to a startup. And if that's all you really want out of the relationship, I think you're leaving the best stuff on the table, because you can always go get more money. But the experience to avoid making those mistakes is going to save you time. And that time is going to be huge in terms of the amount of money that you're going to make on the other end.
So when someone gets that chance then to pitch, knowing where the person's coming from and realizing that there's more than just money, what are some other things they can do to really stand out? Because if you're looking at 400 companies, either through direct pitches or just deals that are flowing through CTAN, it'd be easy just to get lost in the masses. So how do people stand out? Totally.
So, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs, especially these early stage entrepreneurs, to recognize that ideas are worth nothing, absolutely nothing at all. Some people come in with a PowerPoint. It's like, I have this idea. It's like, that's great, but it's not investable. It's really the progress on the idea, right? If you just come in with a PowerPoint slide, I can't do anything with that because I can't see if I'm going to make money on this. What I need you to do is have that idea and make progress, move along the path to success on that. You don't have to be done, but you have to have some movement along the success. And that's why we call, there's what I think of as kind of the 3 Fs, the friends, the family, and fools, the people who put their money in their favorite niece or nephew's company without any knowledge. They just make an emotional investment. Those people get that first step up or leg up, and they help remove that risk from the table so that a knowledgeable investor can say, oh, this is a real problem. A, that's the first thing. And two, they're making progress along it. So I have a sense of trajectory, and that removing the risk from the table is absolutely critical. And that's how you stand out, is to remove the risk from the table.
Nice. So I guess the other question is then how does somebody get to be one of those 300 or 400 companies that CTAN even looks at?
Well, one, you go to www.ctan.com and apply. That's the first step, right? And so you get there, there's an investor button and there's an entrepreneur button. You go down the entrepreneur path and you apply to CTAN. It's literally that simple. You don't have to know some people. You don't have, we're an Austin/Central Texas-based group. We want to support Austin, Central Texas companies, but not exclusively. So we invest maybe 70% of our investments in kind of the Central Texas area and about 30% across the rest of the nation. You go, well, why? Well, why 30% across the nation? The goal number one was make money, right? And I don't want to miss a great deal just because it was in San Diego or in Atlanta or, Minneapolis. I still want to get that great deal. So, we syndicate with other angel networks. We're not going this alone. One, I'll tell any investor, maybe, somebody who wants to be an investor, don't go it alone. That's a great way to throw away your money because it's very difficult to make the right decisions all by yourself. And two, we think the same way with our group. Why should CTAN go it alone? There's, the ACA, the Angel Capital Association, there's 350 angel groups in the country. Why don't I get some learning from those other groups? And so the way we run CTAN is we partner and syndicate with other groups regularly. Even on the deals we do here in Austin, if we don't take the whole round, maybe I only take $700,000 out of a $2 million raise, I'll call up other angel groups and say, this is a hot idea. They've got an extra 1.3 million left in the deal. Who wants in? That syndication is very much that whole concept of cooperation extends well beyond Austin.
So that brings up another question for companies to just apply. They really don't even need to be Central Texas based then, do they?
No, absolutely don't need to be Central Texas. We look at deals from all over the country.
So one of the reasons I ask is several years ago during the pandemic, I was the MC of a pitch fest for an angel network in San Diego. And it was an online because we were in the heart of the pandemic. So the pitch fest was all done by video, but I was the live on camera MC for the event. And of the six, or I guess there were 8 finalists, something like that. 2 or 3 of them weren't from the San Diego area. And I actually asked the main person, she goes, oh no, people can apply from all over, essentially the world, but certainly the country into the pitch competition that they had. And that surprised me, but I guess that's pretty common. And so if you're thinking, hey, I need to raise money, don't limit yourself, right? There's lots of angel networks that you can look to.
Absolutely right. Apply to CTAN first. But yes, there's other angel networks you can. But you asked, how do you stand out? And so one, I'd say reach out to the organization and apply. We certainly want that. But as you have applied, how do you make your deck stand out? How do you make your company stand out? And I tend to think of it as kind of I call it P cubed F, right? And so the first P, so 3 P's in an F. The first P with me and with most angels is always the same thing. What is the problem? Right? Is it a big, meaty problem? Is it a problem worth solving? Is it a problem that's going to change the world? Maybe not going to change the world, but maybe it is. But is it a problem that some customer group, some defined customer group is going to go, that's my number one problem? And if it's not their number one, is it their number 2 or 3? If it's not one of their top 3 problems, they're just not going to have the mind share to engage, right? And if they don't have the mind share to engage, then you're trying to sell something that they don't have time for. That's the wrong way to go. You need to pick a real problem that you can fix. And so that's the first one. In fact, what I tell most people is spend half your time educating me and convincing me of the problem. Because if I'm not convinced it's a big enough problem to invest in, not only will I not invest, I can't invest. Because I have to have a certain return on my investment to roll that money forward. And I think most people don't even understand angel math. Angel math is for every 10 investments I make, 6 or 7 of those are going to go to zero. They're going to go out of business. I won't make any money back. Gone. Wasted money. 2 of them, I'll get my money back. Maybe I get a little bump on top of that money, maybe not, but I get my money back. And 1 of them will give me a 10x return.
Right.
And that one deal pays for everything else.
Right.
And if I don't get that deal, I'm screwed. So every investment I make needs to be with that mentality of I need to get a 10x return on my investment. Every single deal. And if it doesn't look like I can get a 10x return on my investment because the problem's not big enough or the customers aren't motivated enough or the valuation of the company is too high, I can't afford to invest. In fact, CTAN gets roughly a 30% IRR on our investments, which is, don't get me wrong, it's huge. It's a great return. The NASDAQ is a 15% IRR. If I don't think a company is going to give me that 10x return on investment, I would be better off just putting my money in the NASDAQ and taking that 15 points. I can't afford to invest if it's not going to give me this big return, outsized return.
So how important is it for the entrepreneur, the founder, the person trying to raise money to have good speaking skills when they're making the pitch? And one of the reasons is I've actually been hired a few times over the past 20 years to help coach presentation skills for somebody who has to go make a pitch. And I've sat through a number of pitch fests or whatever you want to call them, where some of the people are just, public speaking is not their key. And my opinion is it undermines their pitch. What are your thoughts on being able to present your idea?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that frustrates me because it's not fair. right? It's just totally not fair because you can imagine this technologist, this nerdy dude in the back room who comes up with this great idea and he can't communicate it. And because he can't communicate it, one, he can't get customers, but two, he can't get investors. So when I look at a startup, I'm looking for like a three-legged stool frequently with the founders. There needs to be let's think of it as a technology play. And not all of our investments are technology. In fact, we have a fair number of investments in consumer product goods, a fair number of investments in life sciences and pharma, and certainly a number of investments in hardware and software. But I think of this three-legged stool where there's a technologist, or and sometimes these are the same person, but there's a technologist. There is a business manager. Frequently, that's the CEO, and there's a salesperson. And sometimes that could be two people. Maybe it's an articulate technologist. Maybe it's a business-centric salesperson. But in any case, these three skill sets need to be there. And so that's why rarely do you see a company with just one person get investments, because you're not going to find a person with all three of those skill sets, let alone the bandwidth to do all three of those, right? You have to, and this back to that, let's cooperate and move forward faster mentality. So that technologist is frequently going to be the CTO of a company. If they're the CEO and CTO, then they're going to need a great salesperson who is quite articulate to be able to share that. If they're trying to go it alone and they can't articulate it, that's going to be a problem. And there's a penalty, right? And so it's almost like the technology is half the task, and being able to communicate it and win customers is the other half the task. And you're only going in with half the skill set.
Sure. All right, I want to switch gears here because many of the people who listen to the show, they've had an exit, or they're about to have an exit, or they've come into some money and they think maybe I should be an angel investor. So how does somebody become an angel investor? What do you need to be aware of? What is sort of angel investing 101?
Yeah. So one, you have to have a thesis. What is your what do you want to invest in? Frequently, people want to invest in where their expertise is, and that's a great strategy. If they're a software person, they invest in software companies. We have a number of, we've got 120 members of CTAN, and a number of them are doctors, a number of them are lawyers, a number of them are technologists who have exited their companies. There's a whole spectrum of people, and we have a number of people who are CFOs of companies that exit. So there's a spectrum of people, and so one of the things I like, so I'll give an example. My first investment was in 1995. That's kind of dating myself. And I was a lone wolf. I invested in a startup. I'm still invested in that startup. What is this, 29 years later? Yeah, it's just this walking zombie, and I'm sure it will never go away. But I learned from that experience, right? It's like, don't go it alone. Join a group of like-minded individuals who want to make investments and who have a process and a system and templates that you can use to better the quality of your investments. So we track here at CTAN, we track everything about the investments we make. It's a 80-page. We do a metrics review once a year. It's an 80-page slide deck. It's a thorough. We'll use the word thorough as a very positive word. It's a thorough review of what we track. We track the number of people who were at the startup we invested in it, the number of angels who wrote checks into that company, and it's like if less than 4 angels wrote a check to that company, we know the return is going to be significantly less than if more than 4 angels wrote a check to the company. Why? Because there's a benefit in that group think. If everybody looked at it and said, holy shit, that's a great idea, that's the right thing, then that's a great sign for the company, and there's going to be a good exit. There's a higher probability of being a good exit. So we track a lot of data. And so one of the things I would always recommend to an angel is, a prospective angel, is join a network. If you're local, please join ours. If you're not, feel free to join an angel network in your area. We actually have many members, Florida, Colorado, California, members of CTAN. They call into our meetings. They find value in seeing our deal flow. If you look at an angel group, it's really a dual-sided marketplace, right? I need to bring in deals, and I need to bring in angels who are going to invest in those deals. having only one side of that marketplace does no one any good. So I'm always looking to reach out to more angels, bring them into. We've got a whole group. We've got a staff here dedicated to supporting the angels, helping them get the information they need to make good investments. And when we make investments, we fill out a 40-page due diligence document. It's not like we're investing from the hip. We spend over 40 hours on every deal we invest in, and that's why we get outsized return. That's why our average return is 5x on cash. So by doing this homework, we get a better return. And by having those better returns, angels can look at this and go, oh, that's a decent return. That's a good place to invest my money.
So besides the don't go it alone advice for people who want to do this, what are some of the other mistakes people make as angels? They get in and they think one thing and find out it's something else once they become an angel.
One of the things I see a lot is they join an angel group and they are in every single deal until they run out of money. Mm-hmm. And that might be the first year. And so first thing I tell people is join, but participate in the investment due diligence, even without an expectation of investing. Just get, some experience, right? So you understand the process. You don't have to invest in every deal. I have a certain investment thesis, and when I don't see those kind of deals come through, I know I'm not going to be investing. And when I do, it's like, oh, sweet, I get to participate and I get to help out. And when we do our due diligence, we're on the phone, we're calling customers, we're calling competitors, we're calling, we're doing background examinations. It's our money. We want to make sure it's being well invested. And that's the number one thing is don't go it alone, because now I have people to talk to in areas of expertise that I might not have, or even in areas of expertise that I do have, where they have a nuance or a piece of information like, oh, shoot, that was an important little piece of information, and I will or won't invest based on getting that.
Well, it's interesting. You say some of these people, they just invest in everything when they first get there. What's the downside to that?
Well, I'll give you the one thing that's a downside, and we can talk about that for just a moment. The one thing that's a downside is if you run out of capital, then you're done. It's like, okay, now what do I do?
You can't invest in the next deal.
I can't play anymore. I'm done. It's like, so recognize that angel investments take 5 to 7 years to exit. So you want to pace yourself so your investments are a pipeline. I'm investing along this time, and about the time I run out of capital, something's giving back and returning money so I can continue to invest. So that's part one. For people who was like, I don't have the time or the desire or the knowledge to do that due diligence, we literally have a sidecar fund just for those people who like, I want the returns, I want that 30% IRR, I want that 5x return on cash, but I don't have the time to do this or the desire to do this. I just want the return. And so we have a sidecar fund. They throw their money into the sidecar fund, and they get a piece of every deal for the year. And the beauty of that is, they can throw as little as $20,000 into sidecar fund. Usually angel investments start at increments of $25,000, but they can throw $20,000 into sidecar fund and they'll get all 8 or 10 investments. So they get a piece of each of those investments, right? So they get more diversity in their portfolio. That's important, because the Kauffman Foundation, which is one of the data centers for angel investment, has said you have to be in at least 17 different deals to get the safety of a diversified portfolio. And so you're looking for that level of diversity. If you throw all your money in the first 4 deals and you go, that's 100,000, I'm tapped out. Well, now you've got a pretty heavy concentration.
Nice. So Gary, you've been around Austin a long time. What are some of the changes that you've seen? What's Austin doing well right now as far as our tech community? And maybe what are we not doing as well? What are some areas we need to be thinking about?
I think it's still a small town, still has a bit of a small town feel to it. But, 15 years ago, 18 years ago when we first met, it had a much smaller town feel to it. Everybody knew where to go. We all went to Tech Exchange. We all went to the ATC. We all, if we're an entrepreneur space, we all went to the ATI and helped out and volunteered with Isaac and the rest of the guys and Laura Kilpeace and those people. And everybody knew everybody else. And it's like, it was regularly, it's like, who you need to talk to? You need to go talk to this person. And so we need to bring those things back because we don't have as much. And so I love what you're doing at ATC, and let's bring that back so that people have a center point for those, indicator for those kinds of activities. I'm a little bit worried. So I'm sitting in downtown Austin right now, and I'm a little bit worried because the building I look out at, I've only seen 2 offices occupied in the 3 floors of the building I can see. Is like, that's kind of scary. And so that's hollowing out of our downtown since the pandemic. That worries me a little bit. And I know everybody say, yes, work from home, blah, blah, blah. There's a value in having a critical mass of people exchanging ideas, at the coffee pot or, over at the snack bar or whatever. And now we have to schedule time to everybody to come into town to exchange those ideas. And I think that's slowing us down a little bit.
I'm a huge believer in the serendipity of being around people. I mean, I'm a big believer in why networking events still matter. And I sometimes get to speak to young professionals groups across industry lines. And when I do, I tell them, look, your secret weapon is get really well networked in your community physically and your industry beyond the confines of the city you live in, because that will come back to you in ways you can never imagine. People often ask, how did I end up running ATC? It was from my network from 15 years ago when they were looking for someone new to come in and run the Austin Technology Council and sort of reinvent the community of ATC. It was people who knew me 15 years ago who said, I think we could get Tom, and came to me with the opportunity. And my daughter said when I got the job, she goes, wow, what you teach really works. Like an opportunity, once you have a network, it doesn't go away. And so opportunities, you never know where they're going to come from or when they're going to come. So I'm a big believer in having that that serendipity, whether it's in the office or whether it's showing up at different things around town. So
absolutely.
I ask everybody who comes on the show this question. So my personal belief is community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. So when I say those 3 words, which one resonates the most with you? Community, collaboration, conversations.
Yeah, I like Joseph's response, all 3. But I know you're not going to let me get away with that. So I'll just give you that I'm a big believer in collaboration. I think working together, and it's certainly what we do here at CTAN. Now, I'm on this podcast, but there's a whole board full of people who are making this stuff happen, and there's a whole group of subcommittee leaders who are angels in CTAN, and we've got our staff, Katie and Caleb. All of these people together are working in a direction, and we only are successful when we engage with other people and help them be successful. There's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of effect that goes on that is critical to any community.
Last question. If somebody came to visit you who'd never been to Austin, where's the one place you would take them to show the vibe?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a one place. It used to be you go down to 6th Street, 20 years ago. And there are some historical bits, Zilker, the Driscoll Hotel, lots of other things. One of the things that I really like about Austin and Central Texas is you go to a barbecue place here, and it's unlike a barbecue place anywhere else. And so, inside Texas, we think barbecue is beef. Outside of Texas, they think barbecue is pig. And so I like to take them to a barbecue place, and not a fancy sit-down barbecue. If it's got a tablecloth, that's not even a barbecue. I mean, a place where you're sitting at a bench, some kind of trestle bench, and you're eating with your fingers, and there's a big old piece of paper in front of you, and there's brisket, and there's sides, and there's ribs and everything else. Like, people are like, what the heck is this? And that, in my mind, is, that says Austin and old school Austin and Texas more than most things.
That's awesome advice. Well, Gary, thank you so much for everything you're doing with CTAN, but also thank you for the support that CTAN is showing towards the Austin Technology Council. And thank you for coming on the show. Any final words?
Love being here. Love working with you, Tom.
Nice. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? We do this show for the community. So do me a favor. Tell all your friends. Make sure everybody in your tech company and everybody on your block, for that matter, is listening to Austin Tech Connect. And while you're at it, if you work for a technology company here in Austin, we're trying to do things that really keep our community afloat. And as Gary talked about, keeping those connections alive so that people know where to go, who to know. And if we're living in silos, if we're walled off from one another, that can't work. And so ATC is trying to be that thread that runs through and supports everything that supports our tech ecosystem. But we need your help. Is your company a member of ATC? Find out, and if not, get your company to join today.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.